My husband assaulted me and slept with my sister. You're overreacting, he's still your husband, my mom screamed while watching him hit me. I packed silently. 3 months later, all three were on their knees begging. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. My mom wants me to forgive my husband who assaulted me and slept with my sister. It sounds like something out of a twisted movie, I know. But this was my life. She wanted me to just get over it. To let them build a happy little family on the wreckage of mine. But they made a very big mistake. They underestimated me. They thought I would break, that I would crumble. They never imagined I would fight back. And now, they'll regret ever crossing me. For 15 years, my life was something I was proud of. From the outside, we were the perfect picture. My husband, David, was handsome, charismatic, a successful contractor who could charm anyone. Our daughter, Haley, was the center of my universe, a bright, bubbly 10-year-old with her father's smile and my stubborn streak. We had a beautiful 2-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind with manicured lawns and friendly waves from neighbors. I had a part-time job at a local library that I loved, which gave me just enough independence while still letting me be there for Haley when she got home from school. I thought I had it all. I really did. Our life was built on routines that felt comforting, like a warm blanket. Tuesday was taco night. Friday was for pizza and a movie, with Haley getting to pick. Sundays were for lazy breakfasts and maybe a trip to the park if the weather was nice. David was a good father, or so I thought. He'd throw a baseball with Haley in the backyard, help her with her math homework at the kitchen table, and he always kissed us both goodnight. Looking back now, it feels like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. The happiness was so clear, so tangible, but it was all a lie. A carefully constructed stage, and I was the only one who didn't know the script. The first crack in the facade appeared on a chilly November evening. It was the night of my company's annual holiday party. David had been in a strange mood all week, quiet and irritable. I chalked it up to stress from a big project at work. I tried to lift his spirits, telling him to relax and have a good time. He wore his best suit, and I wore a new black dress I'd been saving. For the first few hours, things seemed fine. He was his usual charming self, laughing with my colleagues, fetching me drinks. But I noticed he was drinking more than usual, his laughter a little too loud, a little too forced. We got home late. The babysitter was asleep on the couch, and I paid her quietly, walking her to the door. When I turned around, David was standing in the middle of the living room, his tie loosened, a dark look on his face. "What was that all about?" he slurred. "What was what about?" I asked, confused, picking up empty glasses from the coffee table. "You and your boss. You were laughing with him all night. Flirting." My stomach dropped. "David, what are you talking about? Robert is 60 years old and happily married." I was being polite. "Polite," he scoffed, his voice dripping with venom. It looked like more than polite to me. He took a step toward me, and I could smell the whiskey heavy on his breath. I tried to de-escalate, to keep my voice calm. "You're drunk, David. Let's just go to bed." I went to walk past him, but he grabbed my arm. His grip was shockingly tight. It hurt. "Let go of me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't. Instead, he pushed me, hard. I stumbled backward, my head hitting the wall with a sickening thud. The room spun for a second. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the haze of confusion. I'd never seen him like this. Never. He stood over me, his face twisted in a way I didn't recognize, and for the first time in 15 years of marriage, I was terrified of my own husband. He didn't say another word. He just turned and stormed upstairs, leaving me trembling on the floor, the perfect picture of our life shattered into a million pieces around me. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened. He apologized for drinking too much and being an idiot. He brought me coffee in bed. But something had broken, and no amount of apologies could fix it. A few days later, looking for a misplaced insurance document in his home office, I found it. His old phone, the one he said had broken and he'd replaced last month, was tucked away in a desk drawer. A strange instinct made me turn it on. It was still charged. And there they were. Messages. Dozens of them. Not from another woman I didn't know, but from my own sister. Brenda. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the phone. The messages weren't just flirty texts. They were intimate. They talked about secret meetings, about close calls. They talked about me. Janet has no idea, one of David's texts read. Brenda's reply, she's so naive. It's almost sad. And then the one that made the air leave my lungs. A message from Brenda, sent the night of the party, is she asleep yet? I miss you. I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck. I ran to the bathroom and threw up, my body convulsing with the sheer force of the betrayal. That evening, I confronted my mother. My father had passed away years ago, and it was just the three of us women against the world, or so I thought. My mother, Carol, had always favored Brenda. Brenda was the baby, the one who could do no wrong, while I was the responsible, sensible older sister. I drove to her house, the phone clutched in my hand like a weapon. I found her in the kitchen, humming as she watered her plants. Mom, I said, my voice raw. I need to talk to you. I showed her the phone. I watched her face as she scrolled through the messages. She didn't look shocked. She didn't look horrified. She looked annoyed. Like I was inconveniencing her. Janet, what did you expect? She said, setting the phone down on the counter as if it were contaminated. You and David haven't been happy for years. What are you talking about? We were happy. I cried, disbelief making my voice high-pitched. Were you? She asked, her tone cold. Brenda makes him happy. He loves her. I've known for a while. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. You knew? You knew and you didn't tell me? She sighed, turning her back to me to fuss with a wilting geranium. Brenda is your sister. She deserves to be happy. David is a good man, a good provider. This is for the best, for the family. You should accept it. Don't be so selfish. Selfish. The word hung in the air, a final, brutal blow. My husband had assaulted me. My sister had slept with him behind my back. And my mother, my own mother, was standing there telling me to accept it for the good of the family. In that moment, I realized I didn't have a family anymore. I was utterly and completely alone. Leaving was a blur. It was a chaotic scramble fueled by adrenaline and a blinding, white-hot rage. As soon as I left my mother's house, I drove straight home. The house felt alien, contaminated. Every framed photo on the wall felt like a mockery. I went upstairs, moving on autopilot. I grabbed a duffel bag from the back of the closet and started throwing things into it, clothes for me, clothes for Haley, her favorite stuffed bear, our toothbrushes. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. We had to get out. Now. Haley was at a sleepover at a friend's house, a small blessing I was immensely grateful for. I didn't want her to see this. I didn't want her to see her mother falling apart. I sent a text to the friend's mom, asking if Haley could stay another night, citing a family emergency. She agreed without question. While I was packing, David came home. He walked into the bedroom and saw the open bag on the bed. For a second, confusion crossed his face, then it hardened. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm leaving you," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I didn't look at him. I just kept moving, grabbing Haley's pajamas from her dresser drawer. "You're not going anywhere," he said, stepping in front of me, blocking my path. "Get out of my way, David. We can talk about this, Janet. Don't overreact." Overreact. The word was so absurd it was almost funny. "You cheated on me with my sister. You assaulted me. And you think I'm overreacting?" I finally looked at him, and I let him see the disgust in my eyes. "The only thing I'm doing is filing for a divorce." His face changed. The mask of concern fell away, replaced by pure fury. "You'll regret this," he snarled. "You'll get nothing. I'll make sure of it. I'll take Haley from you." That was when I knew I couldn't stay another second. I pushed past him, grabbed my purse and the bag, and ran. I didn't look back. I drove to the one place I knew I would be safe, my best friend Lorraine's house. Lorraine opened the door in her bathrobe, her face etched with concern. She took one look at me, at my tear-streaked face and the duffel bag in my hand, and pulled me inside without a word. She sat me down at her kitchen table, made me a cup of tea I couldn't drink, and just listened. I told her everything, the words tumbling out of me in a messy, incoherent flood. She didn't interrupt. She just sat there, holding my hand, her presence a solid, grounding force in my spinning world. That night, I slept in her guest room, the first real sleep I'd had in days. It was a sleep born of pure emotional and physical exhaustion. The next few months were a painful crawl through the mechanics of ending a life. I hired a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who looked at David's threats of a custody battle with disdain. "He has no grounds, Janet," she assured me. "The court won't look kindly on infidelity and assault." She was right. David's blustering was just that, hot air. When faced with the reality of a legal fight, he folded. We settled out of court. I got the divorce, sole custody of Haley, and enough child support to get us started. He kept the house, the monument to our shared lie. I didn't want it anyway. I found a small 2-bedroom apartment across town, in a different school district. It was nothing like our old house. The rooms were small, the walls were thin, and the kitchen appliances were decades old. But it was ours. It was safe. The first night, Haley and I ate pizza on the floor of the empty living room, our voices echoing in the space. She was confused and sad, of course, but kids are resilient. Our new little apartment became our sanctuary. I painted her room a sunny yellow, and we spent weekends exploring our new neighborhood, finding a new library, a new park, a new favorite ice cream shop. We were building a new life, just the two of us. My mother and Brenda tried to call a few times in the beginning. I never answered. I changed my number. They were dead to me. The betrayal was too deep, too absolute, to even consider forgiveness. 10 years passed. A decade of quiet, of peace. I watched Haley grow from a confused little girl into a smart, funny, confident young woman. I went back to school and got my librarian certification, eventually getting a promotion and a better salary at the county's main branch. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We had everything we needed. We had each other. The silence was broken by an embossed invitation in the mail. My cousin's son was graduating from high school. It was a big family affair, and I knew they would be there. My first instinct was to throw it in the trash. But Haley, now 20, was curious about the family she barely knew. "We should go, Mom," she said. "It's been long enough." Reluctantly, I agreed. The party was at a sprawling event hall. As soon as I walked in, I saw them. My mother, Carol, looked older, her face etched with lines of bitterness. Brenda was standing next to her, looking polished and a little tired. David was not there. Brenda had married someone else a few years after our divorce. They saw me at the same time. Carol made a beeline for us, a brittle smile plastered on her face. "Janet, Haley." "You came," she said, her voice overly bright. She hugged Haley, who stood stiffly in her embrace. "Hello, Carol," I said, my tone polite but cool. She turned to me, her smile faltering slightly. "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" She led me to a quieter corner, away from the music. "Janet, this has gone on long enough," she began, her voice taking on a wheedling tone. "It's been 10 years. David has changed. He's a different person now. Brenda is happy. It's time to forgive. For the family. For Haley. She needs to know her family." I just stared at her. After 10 years of complete silence, after she stood by and watched my life implode, this was what she had to say. Not "I'm sorry." Not "I was wrong." Just a demand for forgiveness, cloaked in a flimsy appeal to family unity. "There is nothing to talk about, Carol," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "You made your choice 10 years ago. Now you have to live with it. Haley and I are my family. We don't need anything from you." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, her mouth open in shock. I felt a grim satisfaction. The victim she had created 10 years ago was gone. In her place was a woman who would not be manipulated, not anymore. But as I drove home that night, a feeling of unease settled in my stomach. I had a feeling this wasn't over. I had just fired the first shot in a new war I didn't even know was coming. My mother's failed attempt at a reunion was just the opening act. I thought my blunt refusal would be the end of it, a clear signal to leave us alone. I was wrong. It was like I had poked a hornet's nest, and the hornets were David and my sister, Brenda, with my mother Carol buzzing around them, enabling their every move. The attack didn't come head-on. It was subtle, insidious. It started with the gifts. About a week after the graduation party, a package arrived. It was a large, beautifully wrapped box with no return address, addressed to Haley. I was immediately suspicious. I intercepted it before she saw it. Inside was an expensive, top-of-the-line tablet, the kind I could never afford. There was no note. Just the gift. I felt a chill run down my spine. I told Haley it was delivered to the wrong address and sent it back. A few days later, another one came. This time, it was a gift certificate for a shopping spree at her favorite clothing store for $500. Again, no note. No sender. I tore it up. Then came a delivery from a local bakery, a dozen cupcakes with her name on them. It felt like we were under siege by an anonymous, wealthy stalker. I knew, with a certainty that settled like a stone in my gut, that David was behind it. He was trying to buy his way back into her life, to paint himself as a mysterious benefactor. He was trying to make me look like the bad guy for refusing his generosity. I sat Haley down and had a difficult conversation. I didn't tell her the whole ugly truth, not yet. She was an adult, but I still wanted to protect her from the worst of it. I just told her that I believed her father was trying to contact her, and that for reasons I would explain when she was ready, it wasn't safe for her to have a relationship with him. She trusted me. She was wary, but she trusted me. "Okay, Mom," she said. "Whatever you think is best." The real Trojan horse, however, wasn't the packages. It was my sister. Brenda had always been the social media butterfly of the family. While I barely maintained a Facebook profile, she lived her life online. About a month after the gift offensive began, Haley came into the kitchen one evening, her face glowing, phone in hand. "Mom, you won't believe it. I made a new friend online," she announced, pulling up a chair at the table where I was paying bills. "Oh yeah? Who is it?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though a new sense of dread was already creeping in. "Her name is Jessie P.," Haley said, showing me the profile. The picture was of a generic, smiling blonde girl. She's so cool. She's into all the same music as me, and she knows so much about our family. It's kinda crazy. My pen froze mid-signature. What do you mean, she knows about our family? Well, like, she knew Grandma Carol used to work at the old department store downtown, and she even knew about that time you won the 3rd grade spelling bee. She said she's a distant cousin doing genealogy research and our branch of the family is just fascinating. The blood in my veins turned to ice. There was no way a stranger would know those things. The spelling bee story was a silly little anecdote my mother loved to tell. Only family would know that. I gently took the phone from Haley's hands. Honey, can I just see these messages for a second? She looked confused but handed it over. As I scrolled, my stomach churned. The messages from Jessie were expertly crafted. They were friendly, supportive, full of praise for Haley's accomplishments. But woven throughout were subtle digs at me. Your mom sounds really protective, one message read. It must be hard sometimes. My mom is a lot more laid back. Another said, it's so sad how families drift apart. I bet there are people who really miss you. It was psychological warfare, designed to plant seeds of doubt in Haley's mind, to make her feel like she was missing out on something, to paint me as the controlling mother who was keeping her from her loving family. The profile picture was fake, I was sure of it. And Jessie P. Peterson. That had been Brenda's married name before her own divorce. It was her. It had to be. Haley, I need you to block this person right now, I said, my voice tight. What? Why? She's really nice, Mom. Please, just do it, I insisted, my voice sharper than I intended. I couldn't tell her I suspected it was her aunt, her own flesh and blood, manipulating her like this. How could I even explain that level of toxicity? Haley's face fell, but she did as I asked. I pulled her into a hug, my heart pounding against my ribs. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I just want you to be safe online. That night, after Haley was asleep, I did something I hadn't done in 10 years. I found Brenda's number through a cousin and I called her. She answered on the second ring, her voice surprised. Janet? Don't play dumb, Brenda, I snapped, skipping the pleasantries. Stay away from my daughter. You, David, all of you. Stay the hell away from her. There was a pause. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Jessie P. Really? You couldn't even be more creative than that? You're using a fake profile to manipulate my child, to turn her against me. What is wrong with you? You're the one who's poisoning her. Brenda's voice rose, suddenly defensive. You're keeping her from her family. David is her father, and Carol is her grandmother. They have a right to know her. A right? You think he has a right to anything after what he did? After what you both did? I was shouting now, the rage I had suppressed for a decade boiling over. Oh, get over it, Janet. It was a long time ago. People make mistakes. David loves her, he just wants to be a part of her life. He's been sending her gifts, you know. Did she even like them? She froze. I could hear her sharp intake of breath over the phone. She had slipped up. She had just admitted she knew about the gifts, connecting herself directly to David's campaign. So you're in on it together, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet. You, him, and Mom. The three of you. A little club of backstabbers. I hung up before she could respond. I stood in my dark kitchen, the phone trembling in my hand. This wasn't just about David wanting to see his daughter anymore. This was a coordinated attack. They were working together, a united front determined to force their way back into our lives, no matter the cost. The gaslighting, the manipulation, the gifts, it was all part of a larger, more sinister plan. And I was standing right in the middle of it. The phone call with Brenda was a declaration of war. The subtlety was gone, the pretense dropped. The day after our conversation, I was driving Haley home from her part-time job at a coffee shop when I saw him. A familiar truck, dark gray with a small dent in the rear bumper, was parked across the street from our apartment complex. It was David. He was just sitting there, behind the wheel, watching. He didn't wave. He didn't get out. He just watched us pull into our parking spot and walk into our building. My blood ran cold. He was letting me know he knew where we lived. He was letting me know the distance was gone. This became his new tactic. He would just appear outside the grocery store when I was shopping, parked down the street from the library where I worked. Once, I saw him at the mall, standing at the other end of the food court, his eyes fixed on Haley as she chatted with her friends. He never got close enough to violate any laws. He never approached her. It was a sick, twisted game of intimidation, designed to make me feel constantly on edge, constantly looking over my shoulder. And it was working. I started having trouble sleeping. Every creak of the floorboards at night made my heart leap into my throat. I knew I couldn't live like this. The final straw came one afternoon when I went to pick up Haley from a late study session at her community college. David's truck was parked directly behind my car, blocking me in. I saw him in the rearview mirror as he got out and walked toward my window. I locked the doors, my heart hammering against my ribs. He tapped on the glass. I didn't roll it down. He just stood there, a smug little smile on his lips, and mouthed the words, "We need to talk." I just shook my head, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. He finally sighed, a theatrical display of frustration, and got back in his truck, pulling away so I could leave. As I drove off, my hands shaking, he sent me a text. It was the first direct contact in a decade. It read, "This doesn't have to be so hard, Janet. Let me see my daughter, or I'll see you in court. Your choice." I drove straight to my lawyer's office. I showed her the text, told her about the stalking, the gifts, the fake online profile. She listened patiently, her expression growing more grim with each detail. "He's building a case for a custody modification," she said finally. "He's trying to prove you're an alienating parent. He'll claim he's been trying to reach out, and you've been unreasonably denying him access. But he assaulted me. He had an affair with my sister," I said, my voice rising in disbelief. 10 years ago, Janet. A good lawyer will paint him as a reformed man who made a youthful mistake and has paid for it. They'll say he just wants to know his only child. It's a disgusting tactic, but it can be effective. 2 weeks later, just as she predicted, a process server showed up at my door. He handed me a thick manila envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a petition filed with the family court. David was suing for joint custody of Haley. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the list of witnesses who had provided sworn statements on his behalf, testifying to his excellent character and his deep desire to be a father. At the top of the list were 2 names, Carol and Brenda. My mother and my sister were officially siding with my abuser in a court of law to try and take my daughter from me. The betrayal was so profound it left me breathless. I sank onto my couch, the papers spread out on the coffee table, a legal testament to my family's depravity. The weeks leading up to the court date were a living nightmare. My lawyer and I worked tirelessly, gathering evidence, screenshots of Jesse P.S. profile, photos of the anonymous gifts, a log I had started keeping of every time I saw David stalking us. It felt flimsy compared to the character assassination they were preparing to launch against me. The day of the hearing, I felt sick to my stomach. I dressed in a conservative gray suit, hoping to look stable, responsible. David was already there, sitting at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer. He looked calm, confident. And next to him, sitting shoulder to shoulder, were Carol and Brenda. My mother wouldn't look at me. Brenda, however, met my gaze with a look of pure defiance. The proceedings began, and it was everything my lawyer had warned it would be. David's attorney painted me as an unstable, bitter woman, consumed by a decade-old grudge. He twisted my protective instincts into paranoia. My desire for privacy became isolating behavior. They brought up every argument David and I ever had, every moment of stress, and presented it as proof of my instability. Then my mother took the stand. She cried, dabbing her eyes with a tissue as she told the judge how I had torn the family apart and cruelly denied her a relationship with her only grandchild. Brenda followed, testifying about how David was a changed man and how much he loved Haley. I sat there, gripping the edge of the table, feeling my entire life being rewritten into a narrative where I was the villain. When it was our turn, my lawyer presented our evidence. The screenshots, the stalking log. But David's lawyer had an explanation for everything. The gifts were just a father's desperate attempt to connect. The online profile was a misguided effort by a loving aunt. The stalking was just a father trying to catch a glimpse of the daughter he missed so dearly. I could see the judge's expression remained neutral, unreadable. I felt a cold dread creep over me. We were losing. He was going to win. Then, just as our lawyer was about to rest our case, something unexpected happened. The bailiff approached the judge and whispered something to her. The judge looked out at the courtroom, her eyes landing on the back row where Haley was sitting with my friend Lorraine. Haley had insisted on coming, on being there for me. The judge cleared her throat. "It has come to my attention," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room, "that the child in this matter, who is of legal age to do so, has requested to speak with me privately in my chambers." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. David's lawyer jumped to his feet to object, but the judge silenced him with a wave of her hand. My heart stopped. I hadn't prepared Haley for this. I had no idea what she would say. For 20 excruciating minutes, we waited. David was fidgeting, his confident smirk gone. My mother and sister were whispering frantically to each other. When the judge returned, her face was like stone. She called the court back to order. Based on the evidence presented, she began, her eyes locking onto David, and, more importantly, based on my conversation with Haley, this court finds that a modification of the current custody agreement would be gravely detrimental to the child's emotional well-being. The petition is denied. Relief washed over me so intensely my legs felt weak. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, she continued, her voice sharp as steel, in light of the testimony and evidence regarding Mr. David's recent behavior, which this court finds to be a clear pattern of harassment, I am issuing a permanent restraining order. You will stay 500 yards away from both Janet and Haley at all times. This is not a negotiation. David's face turned ashen. My mother let out a small, strangled sob. As we filed out of the courtroom, a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me, David brushed past me. He leaned in close, his voice a venomous whisper in my ear. "This isn't over." And in that moment, looking at the pure hatred in his eyes, I knew he was telling the truth. This was just the beginning. The restraining order felt like a shield. For the first few days after the hearing, I felt a sense of security I hadn't realized I'd lost. I could walk out of my apartment without scanning the parking lot. I could go to the grocery store without my stomach twisting into knots. Haley and I celebrated with a quiet dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant, a small victory in a long war. But David's whispered threat echoed in the back of my mind, this isn't over. He was a man who couldn't stand to lose, and the court's decision hadn't been a loss to him, it had been a public humiliation. And he was going to make me pay for it. He was smart enough not to violate the restraining order directly. His new campaign was a war of attrition, a series of small, anonymous attacks designed to destabilize my life, to wear me down until I broke. He started with my job. About a month after the hearing, my boss, a kind, elderly man named Mr. Henderson, called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes as he fiddled with a stack of papers on his desk. "Janet," he began, clearing his throat. We've received some anonymous emails. About you. My heart sank. What kind of emails? He slid a printout across the desk. The email was a rambling, incoherent accusation, claiming I was mentally unstable, that I had a history of erratic behavior, and that I was a danger to the library's patrons. It was full of twisted half-truths from our marriage, things only David would know. Another email claimed I was stealing from the library's petty cash fund. I know this is nonsense, Janet, Mr. Henderson said quickly, seeing the look on my face. You're one of my best employees. But the library board has a policy. We have to investigate. It's just a formality, but my hands are tied. The formality was humiliating. I had to sit through meetings with human resources, answering absurd questions about my mental health and personal life. The investigation cleared me, of course, but the damage was done. My colleagues started looking at me differently, whispering in the break room when I walked in. The place that had been my refuge now felt hostile. Next, he went after my support system. He went after Lorraine. She called me one evening, her voice shaking with rage. You will not believe this, Janet, she said. Someone sent a package to my husband's office. A whole folder full of pictures. They were photos of me, photoshopped onto other women's bodies in compromising positions. There was a note saying I was having affairs all over town. Her husband, thank God, was a sensible man who knew her character and immediately saw the photos for the clumsy fakes they were. But still, the violation, the sheer malice of it, was staggering. David was trying to isolate me, to burn every bridge I had until I was completely alone. He was punishing anyone who dared to stand by my side. Then the calls to Child Protective Services started. Anonymous tips, claiming Haley was being neglected. That our apartment was filthy. That I was emotionally abusive. Each call triggered a new investigation. A social worker would show up at our door, polite but firm, needing to inspect our home, to interview Haley alone at her school. It was mortifying. Haley was a trooper through it all, but I could see the toll it was taking on her. She became quieter, more withdrawn. The easy laughter that used to fill our small apartment became rare. The constant stress was like a physical weight. I was losing sleep, losing weight. Simple tasks felt monumental. I'd be in the middle of making dinner and suddenly freeze, wondering what was coming next. The phone ringing would make me jump. A knock at the door sent a jolt of panic through me. This was what he wanted. He couldn't get to me legally, so he was trying to drive me insane. Some of the people in my life started to pull away. A couple of the other moms from Haley's old school, who I'd stayed friendly with, stopped returning my calls. I couldn't blame them. They had their own families, their own lives. They didn't want to be caught in the crossfire of my crazy ex-husband's vendetta. The isolation David had been aiming for was starting to become a reality. I felt a growing sense of guilt. My fight was now hurting the people I cared about. Lorraine was steadfast, a rock in the churning sea of chaos. Don't you dare blame yourself for this, Janet, she told me fiercely over the phone one night after another CPS visit. This is on him. He's the monster. We just have to be smarter than he is. I reported everything to the police, but without concrete proof linking David to any of it, their hands were tied. The emails were from untraceable accounts. The CPS calls were made from burner phones. The package sent to Lorraine's husband had no return address. I believe you, ma'am, one wary officer told me, but believing you and being able to prove it in court are two different things. I felt like I was drowning. Every time I thought I had found solid ground, a new wave would come crashing over me. I would sit up late at night at my kitchen table, a mountain of bills and legal notices in front of me, and just wonder how much more I could take. The legal fees from fighting the CPS claims were piling up, eating into the small savings I had painstakingly built over the years. This was his goal. Not just to break my spirit, but to break me financially, to leave me with nothing. I was exhausted. I was terrified. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of the one emotion I had refused to let myself feel: despair. He was winning. Just when I felt like I was at the end of my rope, the battlefield shifted again. The attacks became more sophisticated, more insidious. David wasn't just throwing rocks from the shadows anymore, he was planting a spy in the heart of my daughter's world. It started innocently enough. Haley came home from college one day and mentioned a new academic counselor at the Student Services Center. His name is Mr. Peterson, she said, dropping her backpack by the door. He's really nice. He's been helping me plan out my courses for next semester. I didn't think anything of it at first. But a week later, she mentioned him again. It's weird, Mr. Peterson was asking a lot of questions about our family today, she said, frowning slightly as she grabbed a soda from the fridge. Like, he asked if I ever felt lonely being an only child, and if I had a lot of contact with my extended family, like my grandmother and my aunt. An alarm bell, faint but clear, went off in my head. That seems a little personal for an academic counselor, doesn't it? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Haley shrugged. I guess. He said he was just trying to get a holistic picture of his students to better support them. He seemed genuine. But I had a sick feeling in my stomach. I decided to go to the college the next day, under the guise of wanting to discuss financial aid options for Haley. I made an appointment with Mr. Peterson. The man who greeted me was in his late 30s, with a kind face, professional attire, and a warm, disarming smile. He seemed perfectly normal. But when he shook my hand, his eyes held mine for a second too long, and I saw a flicker of something in them, a smug, knowing look that made the hair on my arms stand up. It was the same look I'd seen on David's face in the courtroom. I left the meeting feeling more unsettled than ever. There was no concrete reason for my suspicion, nothing I could prove. He was just a friendly counselor. I was just being paranoid, right? That's what David wanted me to think. That's what everyone would think. The answer, the piece that made everything click into place, came from a phone call I never expected. The caller ID was a number from another state. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press the green button. Is this Janet? A woman's voice asked. It was hesitant, nervous. Yes, who is this? My name is Rebecca, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I was David's first wife. I think I need to talk to you. My world, which was already tilted on its axis, spun completely off. David had been married before, briefly, when he was very young. He'd always been vague about it, saying it was a youthful mistake. I never pressed for details. Now, his past was calling me on the phone. We agreed to meet the next day. I chose a small, anonymous coffee shop halfway between our towns. Rebecca was a woman who looked like she had been through a storm. She was thin, with tired eyes, but there was a core of steel in her posture. She told me a story that was terrifyingly familiar. She had left David after he became controlling and emotionally abusive. And then, the harassment started. Anonymous calls to her employer. False reports to the police. A vicious custody battle over their dog. He had systematically tried to destroy her life, to punish her for leaving him. He isolates his victims, she said, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup as if for warmth. He makes you feel like you're the crazy one. He turns everyone against you until you have nowhere left to turn. Then she slid a folder across the table. It was thick with documents. I've been following his life from a distance, she said quietly. For my own safety. When I saw the public records from your custody hearing, I knew he was doing it again. To you. Inside the folder were old photos, legal documents, and a handwritten list of names. This is the most important part, she said, pointing to one of the names on the list. This is his cousin. A real piece of work. David used him back then to pretend to be a delivery guy, a building inspector, anything to get close to me, to find out things about my life. He's a chameleon. I looked at the name she was pointing to. My breath caught in my throat. The name was Marcus Peterson. Mr. Peterson, I whispered, the pieces slamming together in my mind with brutal clarity. The kind face, the probing questions, the flicker of smugness in his eyes. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. David had managed to get his own cousin hired as a counselor at my daughter's college. He had a man on the inside, feeding him information, slowly poisoning my daughter's mind against me. Oh my God, I said, looking up at Rebecca, my eyes wide with a new kind of horror. He doesn't stop, Janet, she said, her voice full of a weary sadness. He never stops. He'll just find new ways to get to you. You need to be prepared. I left that coffee shop with more than just a folder of evidence. I had validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. And most importantly, I wasn't alone anymore. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. I had an ally. And now, I knew exactly what I was up against. Knowing the truth about Mr. Peterson didn't bring relief. It brought a new, sharper kind of fear. The monster wasn't just at the gates anymore, he had a key to the inside. Every time Haley left for class, a knot of ice formed in my stomach. I pictured this man, this wolf in sheep's clothing, sitting across a desk from her, his kind face a mask for the poison he was dripping into her ears. I warned Haley to be cautious with him, to keep her conversations strictly about academics. But how do you tell your daughter that the nice man helping her with her future is a spy sent by the man who destroyed your past? The harassment from the outside world continued, a constant, low-grade fever of stress. Our credit cards were compromised, one after another. My husband's employer received anonymous complaints about his work performance. My car tires were slashed in the library parking lot one afternoon, a message that was impossible to prove but sickeningly clear. Each incident was a drain on my energy, my finances, my sanity. It was death by 1,000 cuts, and the blade was being wielded by David, Brenda, and my mother, a toxic trio of destruction. I was living on a knife's edge, jumping at every shadow, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. I felt a constant, humming anxiety that never went away, not even in my sleep. I was exhausted, but I knew I couldn't let my guard down for a second. The breaking point, the moment that pushed me past fear and into a cold, hard rage, came on a Tuesday night. It was a perfectly ordinary night. I had picked Haley up from her evening class. We'd had a late dinner of leftover pasta and were watching some mindless sitcom on TV. I remember laughing at a dumb joke, a rare, genuine laugh that felt like a release. Around 10, we both went to bed. I woke up around 3 a.m. with a sudden, inexplicable sense of dread. The house was silent, but something felt wrong. I slipped out of bed and padded down the hallway to check on Haley. I pushed her door open gently. She was sound asleep, her breathing soft and even in the dim glow of her night light. Relief washed over me for a half second, and then I saw it. The window was open. Just a crack, maybe 6 inches, but it was a window I knew, for a fact, I had locked myself before we went to bed. The curtain billowed slightly in the faint breeze. My heart stopped dead in my chest. Someone had been in our apartment. Someone had been in this room while she was sleeping. My eyes scanned the room, desperately looking for anything out of place. And then I saw it. On her pillow, nestled right beside her head, was a small object that didn't belong. It was a doll. A small, porcelain doll in a faded blue dress. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't just any doll. I recognized it instantly. It was a doll from my own childhood, one that I had given to my sister Brenda when she was 5 years old. It had been her absolute favorite, the one she took everywhere. I hadn't seen it in over 30 years. There was no note. There didn't need to be. The message was screaming at me. We can get to her. We can get in her room while she sleeps. We can touch her whenever we want. You can't protect her from us. I backed out of the room slowly, my hand clamped over my mouth to stifle a scream. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the doorframe to keep from falling. I stumbled back to my room, my body shaking uncontrollably. I called the police. 2 officers came, their faces tired and skeptical. They found no signs of forced entry. The lock on the window hadn't been tampered with. There were no fingerprints, no footprints. To them, it was just a strange story from a hysterical woman in the middle of the night. "Are you sure you didn't just leave the window open, ma'am?" one of them asked, his tone polite but dismissive. "Maybe the doll was just in a box of old things?" They left after filing a report that I knew would go nowhere. I sat at my kitchen table until the sun came up, the porcelain doll sitting in front of me, its vacant glass eyes staring into mine. Every ounce of fear, every bit of anxiety and despair I had felt over the past few months coalesced into something new. Something hard and cold and dangerous. The terror was still there, but it was now dwarfed by a rage so pure and so absolute it felt like it could burn down the world. They had crossed a line from which there was no return. They had come into my home. They had stood over my sleeping child. They thought they could break me with fear. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the chair in Haley's room, watching her sleep, and my hand was wrapped tightly around that doll. The cold fear was still running down my spine, but underneath it, something else was rising, a fire. I knew I couldn't live like this anymore. I knew I had to do something. And I knew I couldn't do it alone. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting with the number 1 below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me that you're with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement that gives me strength. Please, comment with the number 1, and let me tell you what happened next. The morning after the break-in, the world looked different. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now a tool, not a prison. It made me sharp, focused. The rage had burned away all the exhaustion and despair. I was done reacting. I was done being a victim. It was time to go on the offensive. My first call was to Rebecca. I told her what had happened, my voice low and steady. She didn't sound surprised, only grimly resigned. "Of course, they did," she said. "This is what he does. He pushes until he finds the breaking point. He needs to see you shatter." "Well, he's not going to," I said. "I'm hiring a private investigator." Rebecca gave me the name of the man she had used years ago, a grizzled ex-cop named Garrett who specialized in difficult domestic cases. I called him immediately. I met him that afternoon at his cramped, dusty office above a bail bonds agency. He listened to my entire story without interruption, his face impassive. When I finished, I placed the porcelain doll on his desk. He looked at it, then back at me. "This is more than harassment," he said, his voice a low gravel. "This is a planned psychological operation. They're trying to make you look crazy so that when you finally break, no one will believe you." "I'm not going to break," I told him. "I'm going to break them." He gave me a slight, approving nod. "Good. Here's what we're going to do." Garrett was methodical, efficient, and worth every penny of the inheritance money my father had left me, money I had guarded fiercely for Haley's college fund. Now, I considered it an investment in her safety. His first target was Mr. Peterson. It didn't take long. Within 48 hours, Garrett had uncovered the truth. The university Mr. Peterson claimed to have a degree from had no record of him. The references on his resume were fake numbers that led to burner phones. And a deep dive into public records confirmed what Rebecca already knew: Marcus Peterson was David's first cousin on his mother's side. He had a minor criminal record for fraud from years ago. He was a professional con artist. Garrett compiled everything into a neat, undeniable file: the forged credentials, the proof of their family relationship, a sworn affidavit from Rebecca detailing how he had helped David stalk her years prior. It was a smoking gun. Armed with this new evidence, I went back to the police. This time, it was different. I wasn't a hysterical woman with a doll. I was a citizen with a file full of facts, presented by a respected private investigator. I met with a detective, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, who read through the file with growing alarm. When she got to Rebecca's affidavit, detailing the identical pattern of behavior from a decade earlier, she closed the folder and looked me straight in the eye. "We've got him," she said. "This is conspiracy. This is felony stalking." The system, which had been so slow and unhelpful before, suddenly kicked into high gear. Warrants were issued for the arrests of David, Brenda, Carol, and Marcus Peterson. It felt like a massive weight was about to be lifted off my chest. I spent that evening on the phone with Lorraine and Rebecca, a council of war and relief. For the first time, it felt like the end was in sight. The next morning, I got a call from the detective. Her voice was flat, professional, but I could hear the frustration in it. "I'm sorry to tell you this, Janet," she said. "We went to execute the warrants this morning. All 3 locations, David's house, your sister's apartment, and your mother's place, they're all empty." My heart plummeted. "Empty? What do you mean, empty?" "I mean cleaned out. Furniture's gone, clothes are gone. Neighbors said they saw moving trucks at all 3 residences over the last 2 days. They've vanished. Marcus Peterson never showed up for work at the college that day. His apartment was empty, too. They had been tipped off. They had known we were coming. They had run." The relief I had felt just hours before curdled into a cold, hard knot of dread. This wasn't over. They hadn't been defeated. They had just retreated. They were out there, somewhere, planning their next move. The hunt was on, but now I was hunting ghosts. I stood in my kitchen, staring out the window at nothing, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The not knowing where they were was almost worse than the act of harassment. They could be anywhere. They could be watching me right now. The war wasn't over, it had just gone underground. The weeks that followed their disappearance were an agonizing blend of quiet and hypervigilance. The anonymous attacks stopped. The phone calls ceased. The feeling of being watched lessened, but it never truly went away. It was a tense, unnerving silence, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. The police had put out bulletins, but with no solid leads, the trail was growing cold. They had dropped off the face of the earth. I lived in a state of suspended animation. I put new locks on my doors and windows. I installed a security system. I walked Haley to her car every morning and watched until she drove away. We were safe, for the moment, but we weren't free. We were living in a fortress of our own making, prisoners of the fear they had left behind. Then, about a month after they vanished, a letter arrived. It was plain white envelope, with my name and address typed neatly on the front. No return address. The postmark was from a small town 3 states away. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter inside was from my mother. It was brief, almost clinical. She wanted to meet. She said it was urgent, a matter of family importance. She named a time and a place, a busy, open-air cafe in a town an hour away from me, for the following Saturday. At the bottom, she had written in her familiar, looping script, "Please, Janet. Just hear me out. For Haley's sake." It was a trap. Every instinct in my body screamed it. But it was also the first contact, the first sign of life since they had disappeared. I showed the letter to Garrett, my PI. "It's a trap," he said immediately. "But it's also an opportunity. They're reaching out for a reason. They want something." We devised a plan. I would go to the meeting. I would wear a wire. Garrett and two of his associates would be sitting at nearby tables, posing as customers. The police were notified, and a plainclothes detective would be in the vicinity. It was a risk, but it was the only move I had. I had to know what they wanted. On that Saturday, I drove to the cafe, my heart pounding a steady, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I felt strangely calm, my senses on high alert. I saw Garrett as soon as I walked in, sitting by the window, reading a newspaper. I didn't acknowledge him. I scanned the cafe and saw her. My mother, Carol, was sitting at a small table in the corner. She looked terrible. She was thinner than I had ever seen her, her skin pale and waxy. The bitterness in her face had been replaced by a raw, naked fear. "Janet," she whispered as I sat down. She reached a trembling hand across the table, but I didn't take it. "What do you want, Carol?" I asked, my voice cold. She wrung her hands in her lap. "This has all gone too far," she stammered. "The warrants, the police, this has to stop." "It will stop when David and Brenda turn themselves in," I said flatly. "They can't do that," she cried, her voice cracking. "Their lives would be ruined." "Janet, please." "David, he sent me to make a deal." I leaned forward slightly. "I'm listening." She took a shaky breath. "David will leave you alone. Forever. He'll disappear, go somewhere you'll never find him. Brenda too. They will sign away any and all parental rights to Haley. You'll never hear from them again." It was exactly what I wanted to hear. But I knew there was a catch. In exchange for what? Her eyes filled with tears. "He wants you to do two things. First, you have to agree to let Brenda see Haley. Once a month. Supervised, of course. Just for an hour. So she can know her niece." My stomach turned. "No," I said, the word like a chip of ice. "Please, Janet, just listen. The second thing, he wants you to give a new statement to the police. Say you were under stress. That you overreacted. That the investigator you hired was unethical and pressured you. Just enough to get the warrants dropped. That's all. Then they'll be gone." I stared at her. At this broken, pathetic woman who was my mother. She wasn't just a willing accomplice anymore. She was a hostage, sent to do the bidding of the monster she had enabled for years. And in her desperation, she was asking me to not only betray my own fight for justice but to sacrifice my daughter's peace of mind on the altar of my sister's happiness. I felt a wave of something that wasn't rage. It was a cold, desolate pity. She had made her bed with these people, and now she was trapped in it. "Tell me where they are, Mom," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I can't," she whispered, shaking her head frantically. He'll hurt me, Janet. You don't know what he's like." "Oh, I think I do," I said, a bitter irony in my voice. I stood up from the table. The conversation was over. "You had a choice, Mom. All those years ago, you had a choice. You chose them. You chose Brenda's happiness over your daughter's safety. You chose David's side over mine. Every single thing that is happening to you right now is a direct result of the choices you made." I looked down at her, at this stranger who shared my DNA. "Tell David his offer is rejected. Tell him and Brenda that the game is over. And they lost." I turned and walked out of the cafe, not looking back. I left her sitting there, alone with the consequences of her loyalty. As I got in my car, I saw Garrett get up from his table and walk outside, speaking into his phone. The recording of my mother admitting to the deal, admitting they were fugitives, was all the police needed. They couldn't arrest her right there, it would have tipped them off. But they could track her. And wherever she went, she would lead them straight to the monsters she was trying so desperately to protect. The endgame happened faster than I could have imagined. My mother, terrified and desperate, made a mistake. The police, using the information from our meeting, had placed a discreet tracker on her car. After leaving the cafe, she drove for 2 hours, straight to a secluded rental cabin in the mountains. She led them right to their doorstep. A tactical team, prepared for any possibility, surrounded the cabin that night. There was no standoff, no dramatic shootout. They were caught completely by surprise. David, Brenda, and my mother were all taken into custody without incident. The call from the detective came just after midnight. "We have them, Janet," she said. "All 3 of them. It's over." I sank to the floor of my kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, and I cried. It wasn't a cry of sadness or anger. It was a cry of pure, unadulterated relief. The weight I had been carrying for so long, a weight so heavy I had forgotten what it felt like to be without it, was finally lifted. The legal process that followed was long and draining, but this time, I wasn't fighting alone. Rebecca flew in for the trial, a powerful, composed witness who detailed David's long history of abuse and manipulation. The evidence Garrett had gathered was undeniable. The recording from the cafe, where my mother laid out their criminal demands, was the nail in the coffin. David was found guilty on multiple felony counts, including stalking, conspiracy, and witness tampering. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. With his history, he would likely serve most of it. Marcus Peterson, the fake counselor, took a plea deal and testified against David, receiving a reduced sentence of 5 years. Brenda and my mother were both convicted of conspiracy and aiding and abetting a fugitive. My sister, whose selfish desires had started this whole nightmare, was sentenced to 3 years. My mother, due to her age and her lawyer's argument that she had been coerced by David, received 5 years of probation and mandatory counseling. I never saw or spoke to any of them again. With the trial over, a new kind of quiet settled over our lives. It wasn't the tense, fearful silence of before. It was a peaceful quiet. A normal quiet. Haley and I started to heal. She began seeing a therapist, a real one this time, to help her process the layers of betrayal and manipulation she had endured. It was a slow process, but I saw the light start to come back into our eyes. The easy laughter returned to our apartment. We didn't stay in that apartment, the place that held so many bad memories. With the legal battles over, I could finally use the inheritance from my father for its intended purpose. I put a down payment on a small house in a quiet neighborhood on the other side of the state. It had a little garden in the back and a big, sunny kitchen. It felt like a new beginning. Lorraine and her husband helped us move, their friendship an unwavering anchor through the storm. Rebecca and I stayed in touch, our shared trauma forging an unlikely but powerful bond. We were part of a small, sad club, but we were survivors. Life began to fill up with normal things again. I focused on my work at the library. Haley thrived in her new college, making new friends and discovering a passion for photography. We adopted a rescue dog, a scruffy terrier mix we named Walter, who filled our new home with chaotic, joyful energy. Sometimes, late at night, I still check the locks twice. A car driving by too slowly can still make my heart skip a beat. The scars are there. I don't think they'll ever fade completely. But they are just scars, reminders of a battle that was fought and won. The other day, I was looking through a photo album Haley had made. The last picture was of the 2 of us, standing on the porch of our new house. We were both smiling, genuine, unburdened smiles. Walter was sitting at our feet, and the sun was shining. Looking at that photo, I didn't see a victim. I saw a survivor. And I saw a woman who had fought a monster and won. They had tried to take everything from me, my home, my daughter, my sanity. But in the end, they failed. We were still standing. We were healing. We were free. And that is a victory sweeter than any revenge.